Welcome to This Explainer. So today we're tackling modern prejudice, but we're doing it through a totally different and honestly fascinating lens. We're looking at it medically. The concept from our sources is called the racism attack virus, or RAV for short. It asks us to look at racism not just as isolated individual bad acts, but as a highly contagious, difficult to control pathogen. By using this brilliant medical analogy, we can really start to understand how prejudice functions as this hidden contagion sweeping through our institutions and communities. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with a pretty massive question. What actually happens when a society's immunity just collapses? This crucial question frames our entire analysis today. Usually when we think about prejudice, we look for the super obvious symptoms, the loud, hateful, undeniable acts of discrimination. But the source material challenges us to look right past those glaring symptoms and investigate the invisible spread of a hidden sickness. Think about it. What happens before the cough? What happens before the fever? That dangerous silent window is exactly what we are exploring today. Right, so let's pin down exactly what we're dealing with here. In this framework, the racism attack virus is defined as a contagious illness where prejudice persists primarily as a hidden sickness. This shifts our focus entirely. Instead of just looking out for those explosive, visible acts of hate, we're tracking the quiet, incredibly persistent transmission of ideas. It's essentially the difference between a sudden, visible injury and a slow-moving, chronic infection that spreads completely unnoticed until it's deeply, deeply embedded in the host. All right, moving into section 1, the carriers, identifying the asymptomatic spreaders. Okay, so think about it. If we want to stop a physical virus, we first have to figure out who is spreading it silently without showing a single symptom. According to the RAV analogy, these are the folks who harbor and transmit racist ideas without ever using a slur or acting overtly prejudiced in public. The sources break these asymptomatic spreaders down into two really distinct camps. First, we have the unknowingly infected, whose bias is entirely driven by unawareness. And then we have the knowingly hidden, whose bias is all about deliberate concealment. Contrasting these two profiles shows us exactly how this virus manages to survive and replicate today without triggering any immediate alarms. What's wild about this first group, the unknowingly infected, is their absolute lack of awareness. These individuals hold racist assumptions, but they genuinely just don't realize it. Why? Well, because their worldview is skewed by what the sources call distorted lenses, which are usually shaped by their family upbringing or media diet. They live in these caves of privilege that literally blind them to the daily realities of discrimination. And because they don't see themselves as infected, they inadvertently spread the virus. They'll frequently brush off incredibly harmful comments as just mere banter. They are, for all intents and purposes, the accidental spreaders of the contagion. Now flip that around for the second group. The knowingly hidden operate very differently. They are fully aware of their prejudiced views, but they're also hyper-aware of the social consequences. So to survive in modern workplaces and institutions, they put on these masks of tolerance or masks of compliance. They might smile and nod along in diversity and equity meetings, pretending to be totally on board with progress, but in reality, they're reserving their true beliefs for secret circles, think private WhatsApp groups, where they quietly undermine that exact same progress. They are the deliberate, silent carriers.
Which brings us to Section 2, immunodeficiency, the conditions for contagion.
Just like a biological virus, this ideological one needs the absolute perfect environment to thrive and spread exponentially. It's essentially waiting for the host's defenses to drop. So what lowers our societal defenses? Well, the sources point to a highly quantifiable drop. When economic uncertainty hits, when people feel financially insecure, anxious about the future, or just left behind, collective societal immunity actually drops by a staggering 10%. The virus exploits this exact 10% deficit. It spreads most aggressively when the societal body is already weak and stressed, using that economic fear and anxiety as a vehicle to fast-track the infection. During these vulnerable, low immunity times, the infection starts moving through three specific, unseen mechanisms right beneath the surface of society. First, discriminatory ideas are quietly normalized and passed on, very often taught within families from a super young age. Second, the silent complicity of those knowingly hidden individuals creates really dangerous undercurrents of prejudice. And third, the virus actively seeks out the most susceptible hosts. Let's zoom in on that third step for a second, because it's incredibly insidious. The research shows how the virus specifically targets the vulnerable, preying heavily on young people and individuals from deprived backgrounds. And how does it do this? By injecting false information and hate-fueled ideas straight into their social media feeds. Remember, when a society's economic immunity is running at that 10% deficit, these digital platforms transform into massive superspreader environments. They infect the exact people who are most desperately looking for answers, or, unfortunately, just someone to blame. And that leads right into Section 3, the outbreak, from asymptomatic to highly visible. So, this is where we hit a terrifying tipping point. This is the exact moment the virus shifts. It evolves from a hidden, asymptomatic infection into a full-blown, undeniable outbreak. The silent complicity of the knowingly hidden group creates, as the sources describe it, a safe environment for extreme prejudice to grow unchallenged beneath the surface. It acts like a dark, unchecked incubator. Because this hidden prejudice was tolerated and just laughed off in those secret WhatsApp groups, it normalized the hatred. It literally allowed the viral load to multiply completely out of sight. And, well, what happens when that viral load peaks and our societal immunity bottoms out? The masks come off. Previously, these individuals wore their masks of compliance strictly for self-preservation in their careers and communities. But as those undercurrents fester, the overall societal baseline lowers. The fear of any social consequences just vanishes. Suddenly, that mask of tolerance is simply no longer deemed necessary for survival. We can think of this as the mutation phase. Individuals now feel totally emboldened to proudly operate right out in the open. They might even proudly claim the label of being prejudiced. But here is the really stark reality of this mutation. By the time the masks come off voluntarily and the outbreak is visible to everyone, the sources note that the virus has already deeply, deeply compromised the community's cultural health. The damage is done, and the infection has gone systemic. So, how do we fix this? Section 4, the treatment. Curing the disease from the inside out. Look, if we're only punishing the loud, overt acts of racism, we're basically just treating the end-stage symptoms of an already systemic infection, right? How do we proactively treat this hidden sickness before it boils over? To build real societal immunity, the sources lay out a precise treatment plan to heal us from the inside out, demanding we tackle this asymptomatic strain head-on. First, we have to proactively strip away the masks of tolerance. That means calling out the behavior in those secret circles and refusing to allow silent complicity. Second, we must confront the unknowingly infected by actively challenging those distorted lenses and unconscious biases, basically turning banter into an immediate moment for education. And finally, we absolutely must set measurable targets for real progress, moving way beyond just performative compliance to actual structural change. As we wrap up this explainer, I really want to leave you with a vital question to ask about your own institutions, your social circles, and even your own timelines. Are we just treating the symptoms, or are we actively curing the hidden sickness? Because until we actually address the asymptomatic spreaders, this virus is just waiting for our immunity to drop again. Definitely something to think about.